Okay, you're the host now.
All right. Power. Thank you. Very good to be here and share with you this afternoon about our Krishna House projects here in North America and the principles behind them. My name is Kalakantha Das. I have been a disciple of Srila Prabhupada since 1972. I have been practicing outreach in America most of those years, and over the last 15 years developed this ashram program known as Krishna House, based in Gainesville and now being shared around the world. My goal this afternoon, presume it's afternoon for most of you, at least it is for me, is to share with you some of the perspective on making a more diverse ISKCON that has been a challenge for many devotees in many parts of the world. So I'm going to cover some principles, some experiences, and some of the lingering questions, and then invite you to ask questions here as well and give any input you might like. So with that, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Here we go. Towards a more diverse ISKCON. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi 723, is an invocation. Patra patra, vichara nahi, nahi stana stananana, ye yanha payatanha, kari prema dhana. The distributing love of Godhead, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates did not consider who was a fit candidate and who was not, nor where such distribution should or should not take place. They made no conditions. Wherever they got the opportunity, the members of the Panchatattva distributed love of Godhead. In his commentary on this beautiful verse, Srila Prabhupada writes, here is an authoritative statement that is, in distributing love of Godhead, one should not consider whether the recipients are Europeans, Americans, Hindus, Muslims, or so forth. The Krishna consciousness movement should be spread wherever possible, and one should accept those who thus become Vaishnavas as being greater than Brahmins, Hindus, or Indians. That is our goal, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Everywhere, all over the world, Pritiviti Acharadi Nagaradi Gram. Every town and village, the holy name will be sung. Srila Prabhupada visited Gainesville, Florida in 1971, briefly, and he called it a remote place far removed from the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. In the years preceding our starting the ashram program in Gainesville, one new person had become a full-time active devotee in the past 10 years. Since we began the ashram program in 2008, we've had 375 new devotees who have either joined or come for training in our ashram. What has caused that? Let me just give you a quick idea of what are the backgrounds of these people that you're seeing in this picture. The very diverse group, men and women, as you can see, some from India, some from North America, some from South America, some from Europe, coming together in the practices of Krishna consciousness creates this wonderful family mood that puts smiles on everybody's face. This was taken maybe 10 or 12 years ago. Here's a picture from earlier this year. Again, this diverse group of young people coming together, enjoying Krishna consciousness, reminiscent of the early days in ISKCON when I joined back in 1972. So what are the obstacles towards this phenomenon? Or let us put it this way. What is keeping us from having more diverse temples and communities in our society, especially in certain parts of the world, such as North America? First obstacle is complacency, that things are going well enough. We have stable temples, And these temples are, in many cases, supported by the Indian diaspora. We're going to explore that a little bit. What is the meaning of this phrase, Indian diaspora? Diaspora, of course, means immigrants, those who have dispersed from the motherland. The Indian diaspora is the largest in the world. It is about 20 million people, of whom 16 million are roughly Hindu. In India, you see 80% of the population is of the Hindu background. And in the world as a whole, about 15% of the population is Hindu. But the diaspora, taken in the context of the entire world, is only 1.03. What is that? 1/3 of 1% of the world's population, a tiny sliver. And it's 1% of the North American population. But let's look worldwide first, get the macro picture. Where in the world does the Indian diaspora have little impact on ISKCON? There are a few places, such as in Europe, outside of England, in Russia, where the population is very homogeneous, and indeed other parts of Europe where the same is true, and other parts of Africa other than South Africa. And we could say East Africa in Kenya. Latin America, very few immigrant Indians. East Asia, relatively few. So diaspora has little effect on the preaching in these parts of the world. That's when we hear successful yatras going in places like Ukraine, Hungary, and Russia. You should understand that the population in these parts of the world is 90 to 95% the same ethnic background. So once the code has been broken, how to reach a local population, it is easy to replicate and can be very effective in reaching these populations. Now, the Indian diaspora impact on ISKCON is proportionate, we could say, in parts of the world where outside of India, where the population is substantially of Indian background. For example, Guyana, Trinidad, Fiji, and Mauritius. ISKCON has done well in these places because up to half of the population is of Indian descent. However, the Indian diaspora has made very high impact on ISKCON, disproportionate impact, in places such as South Africa, where the Indian community comprises only 2.7% of the population, and yet is the great majority of the ISKCON congregations. Similar phenomenon in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Indonesia. Then we go more to the first world countries. In Britain, 2.3% of the population is of Indian descent, and yet nearly all of the constituency is of Indian descent in ISKCON. Similarly, in Australia, great majority, in Australia, New Zealand. New Zealand less so, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But still, the foundational congregational support for these temples comes from the tiny percentage of Indian residents. Very pronounced in North America. Only 1% of the population is of Indian descent, and yet the great majority of all of our congregations are from that background. Similarly, in the Middle East, about 20% of the population, yet all of the constituencies there are of Indian descent. In the Middle East, of course, presents a much different view than the rest of the world, in that they have legal restrictions, but no such restrictions exist in North America, Australia, and the UK. So in these parts of the world, which is our focus today, what happens when our preaching, ISKCON's outreach outside of India, focuses only on this tiny sliver of humanity? Well, ISKCON becomes increasingly irrelevant to 85% of the world's population. It becomes known as a Hindu organization and easily disregarded by everyone else. ISKCON leaders will not learn how to reach these non-Hindu audiences. This is another phenomenon that's taking place. We have a wonderful devotee from India, Radheshyam Prabhu, who is visiting the United States and Canada, trying to develop this successful hostel or ashram preaching he has built up in India to great success. So he told me that he has found the ABCs in North America. A's are Americans. B's are Indians who are born in America or Canada. And C's are college students. So he said, I can work with the C's. These are immigrant college students, all males primarily, in various universities around North America. Those people, Radhi Sham finds, I can attract, I can engage, I can teach them chanting and get them progressing on the path of bhakti. The B's and the A's I can't touch, he said. So this is a phenomenon. This naturally happens when we don't have experience reaching local audiences. If ISKCON loses its international appeal, its interest in the movement will dwindle in India and elsewhere. We have to reflect how Srila Prabhupada spent many years trying to start the Krishna consciousness movement in India, in Jhansi and Delhi and other places without success. He left India with one casual disciple. Some of my godbrothers have told me that Srila Prabhupada was rather fed up with India once ISKCON took off in America. He was not getting support. His efforts to get help, to get financial support, to get manpower were all in vain. And so he turned his attention to the North American audiences and then European and Australian, etc. This, however, changed when Prabhupada went back to India with his Western disciples. Then the Indian population took a great interest. So suppose ISKCON loses that asset of having a truly international constituency. How will it appeal to the Indian community in India and elsewhere? Indeed, if we actually look objectively at all Hindu-based organizations around the world, ISKCON stands apart for this reason and exclusively for this reason, in addition to its, of course, adherence to parampara. But that is our parampara, that Kritiviti, that every town and village should have a Hare Krishna center. So if we continue on this path of being a minority ethnic religion, we could become more vulnerable to political and social change. For example, in America, there's a strong right-wing movement to make the country a white Christian country. This could result in the loss of the religious liberty that ISKCON has enjoyed from its inception. So first step to complacency is to recognize that, hey, this is not okay. We need to do something about the situation. As Einstein said, if you do the same thing and expect a different result, this is a definition of insanity. So getting to reach out to the local populations is step one. Getting out of our comfort zone, reaching beyond those who already have a background in Bhagavad Gita and in Sanatana Dharma and Guru Tattva and so forth. So what did Srila Prabhupada do? He first established a comfortable environment for non-Hindus to come in New York City at the Matchless Gifts, 26 2nd Avenue. That facet of our movement continues. Here's Giriraj Maharaj at the Los Angeles Mantra House, which creates a neutral environment. And I mentioned Devamrita Maharaj has been particularly successful at this in New Zealand, where he has opened centers that function as yoga teaching centers and vegan restaurants, and the peripheral classes in Bhagavad Gita and kirtans thus have a built-in audience who see them as linear with the other interests they have in vegetarian or vegan diet and also yoga. So he has, for many years, successfully shown how local populations can be reached in New Zealand. So this outreach effort, what do we need to do? We need to make it familiar or at least relatable. If our cultural overlay on our presentations are so steeped in Indian culture, we will be presenting something that is very difficult for people to relate to. Let us take, for example, the format of our presentations. Traditionally in India, the patient listener will sit at the feet of the guru and listen for extended periods of time, carrying forward this great oral tradition from the past that has that was the whole source of entertainment and education before there were books or internets, a need for books, I should say, or an internet or universities and so forth. Sitting and patiently listening at the feet of the guru can work with those of Indian descent. It is very difficult for those in the West and other parts of the world. So something more interactive is required. Something more comfortable, with more comfortable seating may be required. Something with a less grandiose emphasis on the speaker may be required. The format should be familiar, relatable. The music, the motif of the kirtan is fine if the melody is simple, if the instruments are well played, and if the consistency is very easy for people to enter into. As my godbrother B.B. Govinda Maharaj says, when leading a kirtan, you want to dig a rut and then have people fall into it. So lots of changes, lots of difficult melodies, lots of very showy singing that can't be followed by others. This is not relatable to our audience in other parts of the world, as much as those familiar with the music may appreciate it, the Indian musical tradition. Cuisine, the same thing. Particularly overly spiced food, which is familiar to those of Indian descent, will be very off-putting to Westerners. Westerners can handle simple vegetarian foods, rice and dal is okay, provided they're tastefully spiced, appropriately spiced. But it is even more appealing if we can make the pizza, if we can make the veggie burgers, if we can make dishes with which our non-Hindu audiences are more familiar. We can show them that prasadam is international. Finally, the dress. Now, some of you may be familiar with Krishna West. I'm not an advocate of Krishna West. I love Fridananda Maharaj, but I think that, at least in my experience, it is better to have people dress in a way in which they are comfortable, whether it is Eastern or Western. Some people will veer in one direction, some in the other. Excuse me. The best advice I have received on the matter of dress for preaching is from Radhanath Swami. He says that the preacher should wear what is comfortable. If the speaker, if the teacher is comfortable in their own presentation, that will be communicated to the audience. So some people are very comfortable in dhotis, and that's fine. Some people are very comfortable in Western clothes, and that's fine. The question is not about the speaker as much as how the speaker is impacting the audience. So let's say we do this marketing very well. We're connecting with people. Actually, let me stop here for a moment before we go on. Would anyone like to discuss any of these points or ask any questions? Anyone like to make any comments? Again, our topic thus far has been how to present ourselves in a way that is more relatable to audiences who are not of Hindu background.
Maharaj, I would ask, in your experience, has the audience changed?
Can I just
or is it that the...
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's really a question. Has the audience changed?
Oh, yes. Yeah. My wife is in the next room. If you call me Maharaj, she may divorce me. So, Prabhu, please. Okay.
Prabhu. Very good.
Yes, the audience is changing rapidly. When I was younger, people had longer attention spans. There was a sense of inquisitiveness, a sense of scholarship that has been diminished because of the access of all the knowledge of humanity in one's hand. The phenomenon of boredom was part of my youth and younger years. And what happens when we are bored is that we are forced to think, right? And so we are very easily now spared that inconvenience of thinking by being able to scroll here and surf there. And so people are, as a result, possess of shorter attention spans, which definitely makes our class length an issue. We often schedule 45 minutes to an hour for classes. We actually look at Prabhupada's example. He kept his classes more to the 20 to 30 minute range. And beyond that, in our current contemporary motif, we have found that if the classes are interactive, the response is a lot better. So yeah, the audience has changed, but what has not changed is that inner hole in the heart that people are unable to fill in spite of all of the access to the internet that is available now. At the University of Florida, we had a discussion with the director of the Wellness and Counseling Center. And she said that over the past year, the demand for counseling for anxiety and depression had gone up 100%. Suicide calls had gone up 200%. And they diagnosed the problem was that people felt they had connections, human connections, through social media, when in fact it was not really filling their need. So interestingly, she said, so they had a study, a focus group of students come together, they explained the problem and asked for ideas for solutions. And the main idea they came up with was to have a website. So we are also in a similar situation in that we have to use the social media to reach people more. And this is a challenge for us to deal with the changing audience. But the presence of anxiety, which is caused by the mode of passion, or depression, which is caused by the mode of ignorance, has not changed. So like the policeman who's catching a speeder has to go 95 to catch the 90-mile-an-hour speeder. We also have to be able to use this technology in a better way in order to accomplish our purpose. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Anything else before we move on? Okay. Because we don't have any live faces other than Mike, I'm not sure how much we are being kind of like in the background for multitasking, but I'll press ahead. And I do welcome any kind of feedback that you have. We have this in 3 sections, by the way. So we finished section 1. We'll continue now with section 2. Whoops. Sorry, I lost my spot there. There we go. Okay, so our outreach is relatable, and all of our temples do this in one way or another. At least we do Harinam, we do book distribution. We try to, we hold festivals. I was just speaking with devotees in Toronto yesterday. They have a huge Rath Yatra, 40,000 attendees, but the diversity was very low, and that's concerning them. So they're taking steps. We do outreach, but the results are often unsatisfactory. And this brings us to reason number 2, or obstacle number 2. Our presentation of Krishna consciousness is incomplete. How? We may be relatable, we may do the familiar, but suppose you had a product you were promoting, but when people wanted to buy, you had no inventory. Sorry, we're out of stock. So what is the point of your marketing if you can't deliver the product? In the same way, if we reach out to a local audience, we get interested people, and they say, okay, great, I'm interested. What do I do next? In many cases, we don't have the facilities for them. In other words, reaching out to local or Western audiences without ashrams, shelters for them to come, is like marketing without being ready to close the sale. So the solution to this incomplete marketing is to create ashrams. Now, ashram, actually the word ashram means shrama. Shrama is a wasted effort or a useless activity. So an ashrama is a place where everything is connected to spiritual development. There is no waste of time or effort, ashram. It also means, in a general sense, a shelter for spiritual seekers. So the history of ISKCON is centered around these wonderful ecstatic ashrams that developed in Srila Prabhupada's presence. Most of our temples were established by devotees who were living in ashrams, mostly young men and women with very little background, but who had been empowered by Srila Prabhupada and were enthusiastic about bhakti. Here's a picture of Srila Prabhupada in Chicago in 1975. It was a bit of a gathering of tribes, but you see this large assembly of young men and women greatly enthusiastic, very excited about serving Prabhupada in the mission. I was in this picture and at this event, and we were all feeling like Krishna consciousness is so much better than what we were doing before, that within 5 years, the whole country is going to be Krishna conscious, max. I mean, that was the degree of our intensity. So with that energy, with that verve, we went out and raised money and bought buildings and established deities. And this was phenomenal in the United States. It happened in 40 or 50 big cities, first in America, Canada, and then Europe, Australia, and then elsewhere in the world. So the ashram residents established temples. The temples were then growing places for congregations. They were nurseries for congregations. And now these temples that were opened by the ashram residents are supported by these congregational members, most of whom are from the Indian diaspora. So the ashrams made the congregations. The question before us now is, can congregations pay it forward and make ashrams? Many of our congregational members have reservations about ashrams. This is natural. It said, Atmanam manyate jagat. All of us think in terms of our own experience. So people in our congregations have generally gone to college, got a good degree, got a good job, have been married, have families, have owned houses. And then they have come to Krishna consciousness from that position. So they think, why should we arrange housing facilities and accommodations for lazy young people or people who don't want to take the hard work that I have had to take in my life? They think that if we open ashrams, we're just going to get people who couldn't make it. In fact, if the ashram is run properly, there are no lazies or crazies, as Prabhupada said. Ashrams are not necessary for being a devotee. Again, that's what your experience. That's correct. Our experience has been that if we want people from non-Hindu backgrounds, ashrams are all but essential. Not entirely, like the Wisdom of the Sages podcast program has brought in many nice devotees who are able to take up Krishna consciousness from their homes. And that is wonderful and very important. And at the same time, young people who are in a position in life where they can spend some years in the mission, where they can spend some years in a spiritual education environment. Those people are the future of the mission because of that taste and that ability to understand and appreciate Prabhupada's books in an immersive environment. The transformation from non-devotee to devotee is so powerful that it can inspire not all, not even many, but some of these young men and women who have the ashram experience to become religious professionals, to give their lives to teaching bhakti, and from that platform pursue their family life. This is what we find in any church in any corner in America. There is a religious professional, a pastor, who is supported by the congregation and can give their full time to that purpose. It's much more difficult to take that up if you are already engaged in a family and job situation. So ashrams are not relevant to me, many people think, especially from our congregations. So let me just point out that these ashrams may help your children become devotees. How? Well, first of all, if you are coming to a foreign country and wanting to raise your children in that environment and yet expecting them to keep the culture that has been so meaningful to you, then you're facing a big challenge. Your children are going to schools and colleges that are very diverse in their background. They're going to places where their parents' religious faith is not relevant at all. And so naturally, the inclination will be, yes, I can honor my mother and father superficially, but I don't see the relevance of Krishna consciousness to the peers and the people in my environment. However, if your children see in an ashram setting that young men and women from diverse backgrounds are taking up Krishna consciousness, and they value the Krishna consciousness that your children have been given throughout their lives, that can be a great source of faith and confidence in your children's going forward as devotees. Congregational members who are contributing and supporting the temple may naturally think, this costs too much money and it takes too much energy to start. An ashram requires rooms, it requires beds, it requires desks, it requires some supervision. So that's a lot of investment. Our experience has been that ashrams do need resources to start, but if they are successful, they generate far more in return than they cost, both in human and financial resources. So in summary, we have to understand there are great differences between congregational members and residents of an ashram. Both can be pure devotees, but there are inherent differences. What are those differences? Congregants earn personal money more or less full-time. Ashramites generally have little or no personal money. They may be in college. They may be working an entry-level job, but wanting to understand bhakti. And so they can arrange to pay something in order to stay in the ashram and be able to attend the classes and kirtans and have prasadam. When they've come to a point where those things are important to them, the ashram is a great shelter, even if they're not earning at that particular part of their lives. Congregational members preach part-time and do so very effectively and enthusiastically, especially in the congregational community, relating to people who are like them. People in the ashram have the option and the opportunity in many cases to preach full-time. This is so valuable for any religious movement. Some of you may be familiar with the LDS or the Mormon Church. The Mormons have developed a very effective system of engaging young men and women for 2 years in spreading their faith. They are given language training and sent to other parts of the world. They are given other kinds of leadership and preaching, teaching trainings that they use for the rest of their lives. These are generally young men and women from age 18 to 24. So our ISKCON Ashram initiative is meant to recreate that in the context of our tradition. Congregational members generally have family duties, heavy family duties. Ashram members have no family duties. That's the meaning of the ashram. You come into the ashram not to get into a relationship, but to get into a relationship with Krishna. So these are single men and women who are making a commitment to a celibate period of study, whether it is 3 months or 3 years. Congregational members are materially established. Ashram members are materially insecure in most cases. They are on the path towards getting an education, or they're on the path to developing a business, and they take a time out, you could say, to put themselves in an environment to learn Bhagavad Gita. And they're accepting that, that time out, if you will, just for the sake of spiritual education. And it's important that our comfortably or well-established congregational members recognize the risk that people are taking to move into an ashram. So let me pause there for a moment. Anyone have any questions? Any remarks on this so far?
Prabhu, do you have any kind of like numbers on what's been lost? So originally, say all of the temples in North America came up through ashrams and they grew together into these congregations. Are all the ashrams gone? 90% of them gone? 70%? What's the damage level?
Practically all ashrams in North America have closed, with the exception, maybe I would say 90% of them are closed. There are a couple of active ones in California. And when I'm saying ashrams, Mike, I'm talking about actual education centers where people are coming to begin studying bhakti, and not places where elderly or middle-aged people who have been in bhakti for many, many years are residing as a matter of convenience. So yeah, that phenomenon of young people coming has largely been closed, with a few exceptions. In Southern California, the New York temple is now beginning, the Brooklyn temple under Hansarupa Prabhu's leadership is getting new people coming. Otherwise, The only ones that are active are in those cities where we have established Krishna House outreach programs. Thus far, Toronto, Dallas, Gainesville, Austin is coming up. Others are on the cusp. Baltimore is open. So we're trying to reestablish or reintroduce this ashram culture in our centers, and where the leadership is enthusiastic and tuned into this idea of diversifying, they have embraced and are working with us in attempting to establish ashrams. I'm going to say also, Mike, it's not easy. It's a big challenge. And some of them have tried sincerely and not succeeded. So we're still feeling our way through how it can be done. I don't want to present myself today as having all the answers. I don't. But I can say that this is a shortcoming that I believe Srila Prabhupada would give a lot of attention to, because he took so much pride in these vibrant ashrams where young men and women were joining. When I started, it was a given. It was just understood that people will keep coming. And so ISKCON ashrams could send people to India and send people to England and send people to South America and help establish the movement all over the world, because we just knew people would continue to come. So that dried up in the 80s and 90s, and it's barely a trickle now. So we're doing our best to reestablish that culture where there is interest and desire to do so. But the ashrams are colorblind, culture blind. Any young person of whatever background is welcome. And in the early days, there were virtually no members of Indian descent. In the mid-70s, you could probably count on one hand the number of active disciples of Srila Prabhupada who were of Indian descent. At one time, Prabhupada said, "I am the only Hindu in ISKCON." So we've gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. And the Krishna House Initiative is to try to hit a sustainable balance so everybody can be well served. It is a challenge, though. Yeah, very few are active and very few survived the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Any other questions? Okay. Let me see if I can get us back to where we were. Okay. So finally, about the ashrams, the ones that have survived are primarily men's ashrams. And this is an inherent and non-negotiable part of the Krishna House Initiative to have co-educational environments. This was how Srila Prabhupada started the movement. This is how we need to continue it to make it successful. When there are women present, there are feelings of family that are just not present in an all-male environment. And so we are adamant about that. In fact, that's what really made things take off in Gainesville when we opened the women's ashram. There's a tendency to think that it is much more complicated to take care of men and women, and that's true. An all-male environment is simpler, but it's also less appealing to almost everybody. And the women coming to Krishna consciousness also need and deserve shelter. Prabhupada instructed in 1968 that every temple should have a brahmacharini ashram. This is unheard of in India, virtually unheard of. There are a few organizations such as the Brahma Kumaris who are all women, but to have a co-educational environment is revolutionary. But let me explain why it's so important. First of all, that family atmosphere that existed in all of our early temples is very attractive. The all-male ashrams will not attract people at nearly the same clip. Here's a picture of Srila Prabhupada in 1967, the Haight-Ashbury Temple, the first temple in San Francisco. And you see how the men and women are just sitting together, brothers and sisters. You know, so yeah, the women are up front.
Prabhu, we can't see the picture.
Whoops, I beg your pardon, I'm sorry. I screwed up here. Now can you see? Nope.
No.
Okay, let me try again here. How about that?
Yes.
No,
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. My
Hare
apologies.
Krishna.
My apologies. Thank you. Yeah, you're dealing with a technically limited speaker here, so your input is very welcome. Yes, so Prabhupada had welcomed men and women who came to him without discrimination. There's amazing, amazing devotees here. You see Jayananda Prabhu, Jamuna Prabhu, Shyamasundar Prabhu, Malati Prabhu. Everybody was Prabhus in those days. You know, Prabhu is a misnomer if you know Hindi or Sanskrit. It means sir. But Prabhupada just wanted the young men and women to learn the service mood. So he just said, everybody is Prabhu. He was Prabhupada and everyone else was Prabhu. So everybody called everybody Prabhu. Even Prabhupada addressed his female disciples as Prabhu in many letters. Shilavati Prabhu, Jamuna Prabhu. So we do this also in the Krishna House ethic, which is very uncomfortable for many people. Actually, if I might just digress a moment, there's only one way to address a woman in ISKCON. You know what that is? It is the way she wishes to be addressed. If you're going to be a gentleman, you ask her, how would you like to be addressed? Some ladies who are more traditional prefer Mataji. Most prefer Prabhu, and in my experience, the non-Hindu population. If you call a 19-year-old Western girl Mataji or mother, it is at best weird and at worst insulting. But Prabhu is respectful. Prabhu is consistent with our philosophy. So this is why we adopt what Srila Prabhupada himself did in order to reach the local audiences. Men's and women's ashrams, although strictly segregated, attract new devotees of both genders. Here's a recent graduating photo class from our Krishna House ashram in Gainesville. Young men, young women, sharing the experience of kirtan and bhakti. These are educated young men and women. They are accomplished, capable, people who have given up bad habits to practice the regulative principles. And you see that natural joy that just comes when there is a welcoming and accepting environment. So obstacle number 3 then on this goal of diversifying our congregations, diversifying our temples, is a lack of commitment. Again, it does take men and money, manpower and money, I should say, in order to make local devotees. But we have someone in charge of the pujari department, worship the deity, someone in charge of the kitchen, someone in charge of the treasury, but we don't have a person in charge of diversifying our congregation. So we have to ask, can we really make devotees like Dr. Frankenstein assembled his creation? You know, can we make devotees? Can we put them together in a laboratory? Actually, you know, we can't do that, unfortunately. Otherwise, it would give a whole new meaning to the phrase, all glories to the assembled devotees, right? but in the context of reaching local populations, we have to create an environment that is attractive. Like when the spider is hungry, the spider doesn't chase insects. The spider makes this environment that will attract them and engage them in his nefarious purposes. Ours, of course, are much more benefic and magnanimous. So we have appropriate outreach. We have physical ashram space established. That one thing that's missing is, of course, a leader. But we think of a leader as got to be a Superman. That really is not the case. The leader just has to be a sincere person who has a genuine desire to share Krishna with others. This is a wonderful devotee named Amrita Kali. She was an undergraduate student at the University of Florida. After she graduated, she became our ashram leader for a year or two and brought in wonderful young men and women to the Krishna consciousness movement. So just take somebody who is on fire with bhakti and eager to share with others. To find an ashram leader, we're looking at generally a person on the younger side in their 20s or 30s. It doesn't really matter what their background is, if they whether Indian, Western, it doesn't matter at all. If they have this desire, they could be male, they could be female, they could be a couple, but they need to be on this task full time. It's not something that just comes as a part-time service. The job description includes maintaining the physical facilities that have been created, scheduling activities for students, taking active part in the outreach programs. And if there are no students, praying, Krishna, please send somebody. It's like it said that it's good to have an appetite. It's not good to be hungry, right? So the ashram leader creates the appetite, the desire, and prays to the deities in the local temple. Please send people for us to train in Krishna consciousness. So to review, we have 3 steps to creating and discovering new Vaishnavas and diversifying our communities. First, establish a comfortable environment for them. Second, open ashrams, physical facilities for the most interested. And finally, finding a person to take responsibility for this purpose, for this service, for this task. I'm going to close now with this philosophical evaluation. Here, this is, was it Hegel? I believe this is from Hegel, who proposed in any pursuit, there is a thesis and antithesis, which are contradictory to each other, but change only happens when they come together in a synthesis. So in our situation, we could say that the thesis might be that Bhagavad Dharma does not restrict pure devotees to the Hindu community, as Prabhupada writes in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The antithesis, in a very practical way, is what we see these days. ISKCON is primarily for those of Hindu background. So the synthesis will take place, the change will take place when devotees of all backgrounds can work together to attract local populations to Krishna consciousness. This was indeed Srila Prabhupada's great contribution, and he showed it could be done. So it's hard, it's difficult, but to actually follow in his footsteps means to continue what he started. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm just going to close with some follow-up information.
Oh my God, 12:30 class start ಆಯ್ತು ಮುಗುದೇ ಬಿಡ್ತು.
Whoops, iPhone 13, could you mute, please? Thank you. Okay, so if you'd like to learn more, we have an online book, the Endangered Species, which is available for free at ISKCONAshramites.com. If you would like to get a hard copy of that, we have a simplified hard version of that called Krishna House, which is available at our website, Sweet Song Books, or on Amazon. If you would like to study, or you know somebody who might like to study and being an ashram leader, we do provide a free or inexpensive course of 8 weeks, 2 hours per session on Sundays through what's called Nitai Core. It is not the Peace Corps, but the Nitai Core Hari Bol. That is valuable training in leadership, in sadhana, and in pastoral counseling that is available through the Krishna House Initiative in North America. Available for anyone who would like to train. All of this is online. And we offer this 2 or 3 times annually in 8-week sessions. For more information on any of this, I'd like to introduce you to the leader of the Krishna House Initiative in North America, Brihat Mridanga Prabhu. He is available by Gmail at this address. And so it looks like I forgot to include the website. So I'll put that in the chat. It's Krishna House NA, Krishna House NA, North America at Gmail, or excuse me, KrishnaHouseNA.com. I'll put that in the chat right now. So that is our presentation this morning, afternoon, or wherever you may be. How could I further help you? Purnachandra Prabhu, there in Deland, please, you're doing such wonderful service. Please let us know how we could serve you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for a wonderful class. This is the first time me and Mike Prabhu discuss about this, but this is the first time I am seeing your presentation and nicely put the points. I have one comment and one question. Comment, going through your presentation as well as my experience in US and having different congregation. I felt, what you mentioned is right, but it became as a natural progression rather than somebody thinking in that direction. So I think there is a need to now leaders thinking in that particular direction where, you are trying to, bring that point forward. Otherwise, naturally, it will continue to happen how it happened last several years, which is, where the weight is, the water will flow there.
Yes, it's a good point, Prabhu. And we're experimenting, we're trying. And as in some places, it was just too much, too fast. I think the foundation, the fundamentals are solid everywhere, though. We need to have accommodation for people who want to live in our temples as serious students, not as lazies and crazies. And to keep them lazy and crazies from coming in, we need somebody in charge. So if we haven't come to a point of commitment where we have someone in charge and a place for the newcomers, then we're not likely to experience much of a change. Beyond that, though, how it will adapt in the particular community is quite individual, and one size does not fit all. So we're again trying to apply in various places, and we share amongst the leaders of the various ashram initiatives best practices, experiences, lessons learned. We have a gathering that meets monthly for that purpose.
Thank you very much for your amazing service, because this is very sensitive topic and you are bringing that up. So thank you. And regarding the question, but before that, even I like your presentation because you're bringing the point and also you're trying to give the solution, which is, fantastic. Thank you. So about your 3 points to establish such ashram. So here in D-Land, we have first 2 points, which is, environment is there and, we are here to serve. How to find the leader?
Yes.
If you want to work with someone and how we can attract them, give the commitment saying, okay, let's try this for 6 months or 1 year, whatever time it takes. So how can we do that? Yeah.
Yes, it's a question I hear often, Prabhu. And the best advice I could give is to create a job description or just like if you wanted to recruit a person for a business, you would want to explain, okay, here are the facilities, here are the objectives, here are the support, here's the support team. In other words, we can make it attractive for somebody to come. We can give them the training. So young people who are like those Mormon missionaries I mentioned, they're willing, okay, I'm willing to give a year or 2 to the mission of my young adult life. I'm willing to forego my immediate economic development and family development for the sake of the mission. Bhakti is that meaningful to me. People like that are very precious and very rare. So the best advice I could offer is to try to create a job description that would be attractive. Okay, here's where you would stay. Here's what we would expect. Here's what we would provide. In the long run, I'm sincerely hoping that our temples will evolve to a point where they will be able to hire people professionally for these purposes. So a young man or young woman can say, here's a reasonable way for me to spend a couple of years while I can earn something and contribute to the mission. So after a couple of years, if I don't choose to continue, I won't be destitute. I won't be out on the street. I won't have just invested my time well spiritually, but not in terms of my life plan. And again, I do have to emphasize the average starting salary, or the average salary, excuse me, for a religious professional in America is $50,000 a year. That's the average. There are 350,000 religious congregations in America. In my experience in ISKCON, I know only 1 or 2 people who are earning that degree of income, which is a bare minimum to take care of a family these days. In the earlier days, we had people who were willing to make that kind of commitment and sacrifice and just say, I'm going to just depend on Krishna for whatever. I just want to serve and serve and serve. And that was how we were all brought up. That degree of submission and surrender is not only rare, but it's not really responsible anymore. If we want to have people who will focus their education on becoming the best exemplary presenters of Bhagavad Gita, and we want them to be in our community long term, we're going to need to figure out how to support them. So sannyasis are by nature transient, and they have to move according to their ashram. So if we want people to be local, to be stable, we need to prepare a package for them and offer it and advertise it. And then you see, once we have that established, young people coming can step into those leadership roles more readily and give that valuable contribution of a couple of years. But we have to prime the pump. And even in Gainesville, where we have young people coming regularly by Krishna's grace, we are 1 out of 10 may be willing to commit a year or two to just developing an ashram full time. And honestly, in some cases, those people have tried and been unsuccessful because of the lack of support from the local temple. So this is the challenge, to figure out, okay, how can we give a career path for a person to diversify our congregation?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Okay. May not be the answer you wanted to hear, but this is the reality on the ground.
Yeah, but at least it gave, because of your experience in this field, it at least gave a few steps to us. So we will try to walk. I don't know whether it will be successful, but at least we have that direction.
If you're walking in that direction, please know you're not walking alone, that we are here for you. We want to support, we want to provide. If we can get volunteers to come and help for a year or two, we send them gladly.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. You're right, Prabhuji. It is a very sensitive point. We don't want to in any way minimize the incredible contributions of our congregations, right? And the congregations are the lifeblood of ISKCON at this point. But we are working with those in the congregations who recognize that Prabhupada's vision and mission was more diverse. So together we work. Initially, Prabhupada described the lame man and the blind man, remember? India was the blind man, lame man, and America was the blind man. And together they could cooperate. So it's kind of reversed now with the Indian diaspora becoming so successful. It is the richest minority in the United States per capita. And this is why the brain drain in India, so many have come to America for the economic opportunities. So now can we provide for young men and women in a way where we say, just come and live with us and serve full time, and we'll provide your basic necessities while you're learning this culture that is so meaningful to us. That takes a lot of enlightenment from our congregational members. Fortunately, there are many who are rising to the occasion and stepping to the plate. Any other questions? We've done our hour.
Prabhu, I just want to make a comment that there's at least one actual Ashramite on the call that's from DeLand. And my only experience directly with Ashramites is in DeLand. And you had one bullet point that was, yes, there is a cost, but it more than pays for itself. I'm not sure how you put it, but I have seen this firsthand. They're not just running a temple and a prasadam hall, but they're running a ranch actually.
Yes.
And all the work that goes in. So it's really astounding to have people like that committed to do that. And so that's what got me interested when I saw that you had this passion and this book to try and get the word out, and I'll help any way I can in continuing along with that.
That's beautiful, Prabhu. Thank you. Yes, young people have the verve and the energy to develop the farm, and the challenge is to create a scene. You create a scene where there's many young people together, and they feel a sense of ownership and empowerment. That tends to attract others. The challenge with a farm like DeLand is to get people to come. And to get people to come, you need people to go out and introduce people and create the awareness. Of course, that can be done online more and more too. So that with the program that people are invited to, it can be presented in a way that is attractive and people are coming regularly. And then from that group, you can say, you know, if you'd like to live here for a month or for 3 months, we have a facility you can stay in. We have a structured program and a curriculum. You can learn the Bhagavad Gita. And this is why it's great to be connected with the program that you're doing, the Vidyalayam, the educational center. We have a program where you can immerse yourself for 3 months. It's great if they can contribute service instead of money. For young men and women who are seekers, they are not necessarily coming from an affluent background. Oh, wow, I can do work study. That's great. Then I don't have any expense. I can maintain myself. I can get my meals. I can have my shelter, and I can learn Bhagavad Gita. Okay, that's a package that appeals. I do have to say that perhaps the more business savvy ashrams who are less philosophically astute than we, they say, yes, come and you can learn karma yoga, and it's only $1,000 a month. So they get people to come to work and to pay. So I don't know, maybe that's what it takes. I don't know, but we are just really giving the real item here, and we're very happy if people will come and take it. I don't know, Purnachandra Prabhu, what do you think? Is it like the free mangoes story? You know that story Prabhupada told? The philanthropist was walking through the village, free mangoes, and nobody would take them. There must be something wrong. So he got the idea. He said, mangoes, 1 rupee. Oh, 1 rupee, very good price. So I don't know, maybe we have to try that.
Yeah, but what you suggested is right. We need to package it and make it happen so that people will get attracted. Yeah.
Right, and this is what a full-time leader would be charged with doing. Okay, this is your job to figure out how to do it. How should we market it? How should we package it? Thank you very much, Prabhu. Anything else? All right, real pleasure to see you, those who I can see and those who joined to listen in. Thank you very much. I'm here. You have the information. Any follow-up, we are very happy to support you any way that we can. Hare Krishna.
Very well. Thank you.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol.
Very well.
Hare Krishna.